Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of What in the World. I hope you're all excited for today's episode, which will tackle the difficult question of whether China's growing involvement in Ecuador represents a model of South-South cooperation based on mutual development, or a more exploitative form of neo-extractivism, resource dependence, and a monopolization of Ecuador's resources. To assist with this loaded topic, I have here with me Professor Elise March. Thank you for being here, Elise.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Elise has worked for over a decade as a policy advisor and regional analyst with the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, focusing on Latin America's evolving geopolitical landscape. More recently, she has been conducting independent research on China's growing influence in South America, particularly in Ecuador, where she's examined how Chinese-led hydropower and mining projects shape national development, sovereignty, and environmental stability. The question we aim to answer here today is a big one. Is China's growing presence in Ecuadorian territory, projects, and politics a good thing? But to begin, could you tell us about how this interesting South-on-South relationship between Ecuador and China came about?
Of course. So, the beginning of this relationship goes back to 2009, when Ecuador was in the middle of a global financial crisis and global oil prices had collapsed. As Ecuador's debt grew, which shut them out from using traditional markets, China came in with an offer in August of 2009 to lend Ecuador's state-owned company Petroecuador $1 billion for 2 years at 7.25% interest. And since then, the relationship has expanded significantly with major infrastructure projects that align with China's broader global strategy known as the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. And although Ecuador formally joined the BRI in 2018, many of China's earlier projects reflect the initiative's underlying logic to secure strategic economic influence through large-scale infrastructure financing and resource for loan agreements.
I see. I'd like to know some more about China's intentions here from your perspective. The media often refers to China's global expansion agenda, particularly in a negative light. But how was this relationship represented by both the Chinese and Ecuadorian side?
So, as you would know, Tim, China's global expansion agenda is something that's incredibly complex. However, it is largely accepted that China has dedicated itself to increasing its economic, political, and cultural influence worldwide through substantial investment opportunities and enhancing their role in the global governance sphere. And in recent years, China has deliberately expanded its economic footprints in regions that have been characterized by political instability, weak institutions, and high financial risk. So places where Western governments and investors have often been more hesitant or selective to go to. So countries like Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and of course Ecuador have become central to China's foreign economic strategy. And on the one hand, an optimistic view, which is grounded in liberal internationalism, would suggest that China is actually truly looking to improve global foreign relations by mutually benefiting Ecuador's and their own personal economies. The former Prime Minister Li Keqiang has openly justified their relationship as mutually beneficial, stating that China has equipment manufacturing capacity and integrated technology with competitive prices, while Latin America has the demand for infrastructure expansion and industrial upgrading. Similarly, former Ecuadorian Foreign Minister Ricardo Patiño has indicated that diversifying their foreign relationships is a convenient and healthy thing. However, a pessimistic view, which would be grounded in a neo-imperialist tradition, suggests that China may have come into Ecuador with the intention of abusing their political and economic influence and extracting as much as they can from Ecuador with little to no regard for the health of the state.
Well, clearly political figures are happy to justify this relationship to be for the good of the Ecuadorian community and for the benefit of global foreign relations. I think this brings us to the crux of our conversation here. Currently, Ecuador is suffering from a dwindling economy, a degrading environment, and nationwide energy blackouts. Do you believe that China's infrastructure projects in Ecuador have anything to do with these issues? Are they a representation of China exploiting Ecuador's fragile position and fruitful natural resources?
As always, I would be hesitant to blame all of these big issues on one actor. However, there have been some major human rights concerns about how Chinese projects in Ecuador are being managed. So according to the World Politics Review briefing by Julie Randomski, Ecuadorian workers have repeatedly protested about wages, healthcare, food and general working conditions. Furthermore, VOA News, amongst other sources, have reported that the 8 Chinese-owned hydropower plants are all underperforming, which has caused blackouts, safety issues, and concerns about the longevity and sustainability of the projects. In addition to this, China is sort of seen as getting their foot in the door with these hydropower infrastructure projects, which opens up the potential to invest in other key areas like mining and agriculture. Already in 2012, a Chinese joint venture paid $100 million to the Ecuadorian government for the rights to the Mirador copper mine, with a commitment to invest $1.4 billion over 5 years, which shows China's clear leverage over Ecuador. So whilst these projects have the potential to be economically and politically beneficial, China has displayed poor management, which unfortunately negates potential gains here.
That is incredibly interesting, Elise. Having started with those economic, political and social concerns, would you agree that this relationship is not just one of extractivism? What benefits are there for Ecuador and more widely international relations as a whole, apart from the general diversification of foreign relations for Ecuador as aforementioned?
Of course, I think there are some beneficial aspects to this relationship. So generally speaking, projects like hydropower plants are fantastic in terms of benefiting the environment while sustainably boosting Ecuador's economy and quality of life. But that's provided that they're functioning correctly and the projects are appropriately managed. So recently, in May of 2023, Ecuador and Beijing heightened economic ties with one another by signing a free trade agreement that specifically targets agricultural products for tariff reductions. And the free trade agreement has the potential to increase bilateral trade by $3 to $4 billion over the next 10 years. So framed in this way, Chinese money is building roads, highways, bridges and hospitals, which is putting $11 billion into the country. Now that is a good thing.
Right, it appears like a good management of beneficial projects is crucial for Ecuador to really benefit from their partnership with China. Well, I know there's lots more to this relationship that we've hadn't time to discuss today, but thank you very much for your time and expertise, Elise. It's been very insightful.
It was my pleasure. And if anyone listening is interested in this topic, I will link all my academic sources below for you guys to access.
Thank you, Elise, and thank you, listeners. And please tune back in next week to What in the World for an episode about the colonial relationship between Spain and Latin America.